Hello, welcome to Marathon Swim Stories, where we connect with curious and courageous individuals from all walks of life to explore our relationship with water, what holds people back, and why others keep going, where we investigate the connection that we have with each other, those who support us, and the water that is 70% of our planet. If you've ever stood at the edge of a body of water and wondered, you're in good company. I'm Shannon Keegan, mom, wife, marathon swimmer, swim efficiency coach, and founder of Intrepid Water, where I teach swim freedom, virtually, locally, and abroad. The freedom to get started, break out of your comfort zone, or shatter your preconceived notions of what's possible. Find out more at intrepidwater.com. I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest. I've had the joy of supporting Beth for the past 2 seasons. It's just amazing to work with someone who so fully embraces the path of continuous improvement and surprises themselves with what's possible along the way. I hope you enjoy Beth's story. If you would like to join us on the path of continuous improvement, it's an opportunity to do more than just resolve to change as one usually does this time of year. It's an opportunity to embrace a new strategy with a clear vision of where you want to go and why. Make this the year that you support yourself in the progress you seek to make. Change is hard. Let's do it together. Hit the link in the show notes to join our Swim and Live Smart community. Thank you for being a Marathon Swim Stories listener. Please share this story. You never know who you might inspire to find out what they're capable of in the water. Happy New Year. I hope to hear your story in 2025. I'm very excited. This has been a long time coming. Beth and I have been working together for 2 years, right? And I'm so excited to finally record your marathon swim story. Beth, tell me, what's your story?
Well, I'm excited to be here. So my story with the water is that the water was a backup plan. It was never my go-to as a place to just relieve stress or just be present with the water. I failed swim lessons as a child. Back in the olden days, they used to rank you at the YMCA and you had to progress from one step to the next. And I, every year, would not progress. And finally, I was like, do I have to do this? And the answer is no, you don't. And so I kind of just went through life with the ability to just survive in the water. But as I got into my 20s, my knee kind of started having some trouble. And then in my mid-20s, I had to have a hip surgery where I had a labral tear. And so I was kind of forced to look beyond my initial loves of enjoyment and hobbies in life. So I really enjoy hiking, specifically long trekking. I've been very blessed with the opportunity to trek up Kilimanjaro and trek the Tour du Mont Blanc, which is in Italy and France and Switzerland, and trek Machu Picchu, just beautiful. And so that's my first love. And so I'm like, for a couple years, I didn't really know what this hip surgery would hold for me. So I was like, I need to look at other options. So swimming was a natural backup plan. So I ended up taking adult swim lessons at our YMCA. And it was pretty interesting. I'm a high school chemistry teacher. And one of my students was the instructor. And that was odd, very humbling. And so my student, a swim instructor, helped me learn about blowing bubbles in the water and helping me think about floating. And that was a journey. So I was very motivated to keep going because I wanted to do something. So I just kept showing up. I was just that woman who kept trying. So it went from swim lessons as an adult, and then I wanted to continue to get better. So I joined a master's swim group at our YMCA, and I was the worst person there by far. But the coach was just so flexible and made a special fitness program for me that involved swimming one length of the pool. And I remember I couldn't swim back. And so she had me like tread water for a little while and like keep going. Like it was great. There was obviously a lot of room for progress when you start out not being so great. So I just kept showing up and I kept progressing. And so over the course of time, I started getting better, but I was growing frustrated. I wanted to get better, but I didn't really know what to do. I've noticed that a lot of swim programs for adults are about like survival in the water and being comfortable in the water. Or if you already have an existing amount of swim skill, to use that for fitness. But I didn't have the technique and I really wanted to grow in my technique. So I just kept going on this journey, researching how to have good swim technique, researching what coaches in my area would be willing to help an adult. So I just kept moving around, looking for programs and looking at individuals who could help me. And I found some really good friends, and they were so wonderful to help me learn. Some of those friends were in the triathlon community, and they were very encouraging. I decided I was going to do my first sprint triathlon, which is a pretty short one. It was a 300-meter swim. And I remember working so hard to be able to achieve this goal of a 300-meter swim. And it was so fun. I just remember being so winded and I felt like I was in over my head with this big goal, but I did it. And that just started this progression of my friends being involved in certain events and me being like, well, that's just a little bit further. I think I could do that. And so I just kept making this progress. And I had some friends who had done an open water 1-mile swim at a lake near my home in Virginia. It was called Lake Mumont, and it's 1 mile. And this was a huge goal for me. I just remember I had just had my second child and I was on maternity leave. And that was my goal for maternity leave, was to make progress so I could do this 1-mile swim. And it was wonderful to just have as a goal. My family supported me on that day, and we did it. So that's kind of where I kept started. And I experienced some shoulder pain in this journey. And I just kept that progress of looking for resources to help myself. And I found Swim Mastery. And in Swim Mastery, it was really wonderful to learn what appropriate techniques I could finally use in the water. I felt like I finally had some coaching and direction to know what to do with my body in the water and how I could move efficiently through the water. And I think that changed so much for me. It gave me a structure, a framework, and a direction. And so I have just stuck with Swim Mastery. My goals have just kind of taken off from there. So I think that's my background as to how I kind of got into marathon swimming. It was definitely a backup plan. It's not my first love. I still love trekking and hiking, but it's been a fun adventure.
It's been amazing to, as your coach, observe your motivation and drive in anything that you're doing. I'm curious, I don't know, it was just kind of occurred to me when you were talking about your student being your teacher and your willingness to keep coming back. And I'm just wondering if there was any desire, and modeling, even for your kids and to your students, like, was that any kind of a driving factor? Or was it really, is it just innate in you, because it's really hard to keep showing up if you're not doing well, or if you're not feeling like you're making progress at the rate that you want.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So for right now, I would have to say the reason I keep showing up is definitely for my children. I want them to see that it's okay to set goals and it's okay to not be good at them, to just keep making small steps, and it's okay to not achieve your goal. And I think that right now is my driving factor. I actually think back then it almost became a game. And here's what I mean by that. I was a tennis player in my high school days, and I was quite good. And it put a lot of pressure on me to keep doing good. And I found that I enjoyed activities where I was so bad that nobody had expectations for me, that just by showing up, I could make progress because nobody expected anything. I was just that woman who just started swimming. Oh, look at her. She's really trying. It's so good that she showed up. But now that with that experience and a decade of just showing up, oh, no, that's what it really means. That's what it's all about, is if you really do have a goal, it doesn't matter how small or how big, if we just show up, like that's how we make progress towards that. So I will say it did start out to be a bit of a game and just seeing like, how much progress can I make? I couldn't get any worse. I was just blowing bubbles. So yeah, I think back then it was just a hobby and it was a fallback plan. But now it's definitely become something for myself that I want to, it's hard for me. And I like that as a template for my kids to see, but it also gives me a lot of, I guess, reward to just see I can do something for myself and not just get lost in my journey as a science teacher of high school students and as a mom. This is my little thing.
Yeah. Let's talk about that more. So when you came to me, you wanted to do your first 10K and you'd previously done, I think, a 5K, right?
Yeah, that was painful. The 5K. Oh my goodness. So I went from doing Lake Mumalt, which is a 1 mile swim, and then my city hosted an Ironman triathlon for the first time. And that was a huge deal locally. Lots of athletes just got together from my city and wanted to be a part of this program. And so my friends were doing, and I love my friends. So I gathered a relay team. My husband was going to be our runner. I had a great friend of ours that was going to be our cyclist. So then that pushed me to like a 1.5 mile swim. And some of those friends were interested in doing a 2 mile swim. I was like, well, I felt like I finished my 1.2 mile swim for my Ironman relay and I had fun doing it. Okay, let's try 2 miles. That was good. And then there was a local event that was a 5K and I didn't have to travel very far. And I said, well, let's give this a go. And I worked so hard just trying to prepare myself mentally, physically for that. And I had so much pain from doing that 5K swim in my neck, in my shoulders, in my lower back. It was not a pretty journey, but I didn't want that to be the end of my swimming journey. I wasn't ready to lay this hobby aside. So I think that is kind of part of that idea of progress. Like we just keep showing up. I wanted to keep showing up, but I was in so much pain and I knew there was something I could do about it. But all the resources that I had consulted weren't getting me there. It wasn't fun anymore if I was hurting. So that was part of that plan. I was like, I need a coach. I need somebody to give me direction and like a framework. So yeah, I found Shannon, you with Intrepid Water and Swim Mastery. And I think that with virtual coaching, I didn't know what to expect, but I just made so much progress so quickly without experiencing shoulder pain, neck pain, lower back pain, that it made the journey fun again. And that idea of showing up and doing something I like.
Yeah. I think you started out with a self-paced course, didn't you? Freestyle fundamentals.
I did. Yes. It was freestyle fundamentals and it was very humbling. So I feel like some folks, when we've been swimming for a while, it's really hard to stop doing what you've been doing and start blowing bubbles again and just doing a few strokes in the water and standing up. And I think because of my background of being that woman in the water, blowing bubbles, doing such a horrible job, it was easier for me to humble myself a bit. And with the freestyle fundamentals, with Swim Mastery, to break it down, to stop trying to just swim more distance, but to swim it well and to relearn the body mechanics, the muscle memory, and just I think the word is proprioception of where my body is in the water. That was very humbling. And I saw the benefits of it. So I try to remember now, if I need to, just in other aspects of my life, whether it's my teaching career, oh goodness, being a mom, like, maybe I need to back up a little bit and just reevaluate where I am. Like the principle definitely extends. Like it was very humbling to break down my stroke and just work on simple things like body position, recovery and shifting my weight and what I'm doing with my head in the water, which is still a struggle. But I think just looking at how we can accept direction and just keep trying.
Yeah. I love your curiosity as a science teacher, because you bring that into your practice, which is really cool because we want to know why. So maybe you could expound a little bit more on that.
Yeah. So I feel like as a science teacher in teaching chemistry, I'm always thinking about, well, why would we do this? What impact does this have? I remember it was so fun to think about. I enjoy doing for my freestyle stroke a 2-beat press or 2-beat kick, as some would say. And I remember we were talking about working on counterbalance as I shift my weight. And I remember applying like physics principles, like what am I counterbalancing? Where is this weight that I am shifting? And so that was really fun to kind of bring some like just physics thinking into it. And yeah, I think that I enjoy being able to use my science background to just think about, oh, well, if I keep doing the same experiment with the same outcome, maybe I need to go back, use that data, modify the experiment. And oh, it's just kind of silly to think about like how we teach our students this, and yet I don't do it in my real life.
Well, and I think it's a really interesting point, though, because I think there's a lot, it feels to me like in the swimming world, there's a lot of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I remember in my journey, like, okay, I'm going to descend these 3 100s, and this one's definitely going to be faster somehow. And I'm just going to get back to this wall somehow faster than I did the one before. And there wasn't necessarily any science to back up. I was just going to miraculously come back at a faster time. And I maybe knew enough about my body to like work a little harder, but the time wasn't necessarily guaranteed until I started digging into understanding swim mastery principles and that you can actually affect what's happening between the walls. So tell us a little bit about what that was like for you, especially coming off of this 5K that was really painful and uncomfortable, and then you started getting into freestyle fundamentals.
I would say training for my 5K was very much like just showing up, doing the exact same thing over and over again. So for example, with sighting for this 5K, my neck just kept hurting and kept hurting. I'm like, well, I guess that's just the way it's gonna be. Like, this must be what swimming's like, or this must be what I'm just gonna move my arms faster because that will make me swim faster. And just that repetition of the wrong thing over and over again. So when I got involved in swim mastery with freestyle fundamentals, I thought it was really beautiful to be able to, instead of having my goal being swimming 50 yards after 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards, 500 yards, my goal became, how can I maintain focus on one aspect of my stroke and improve this one aspect of my stroke? And I remember thinking like, oh, well, I know, I'll just do my freestyle fundamentals activity, focus on one principle, like building my frame with my torso and my shoulders and my head. And then I'll just swim after that. And I was like, oh no, that's not what they mean. They want me to like stop swimming except for this one particular aspect of my stroke. And while looking back now, that just makes so much sense. Don't I need to have like one foundational principle to build on and master that before I build on it? I do that for my students. Like if we work on understanding the atom, we always build from the inside out, one skill on top of another. So looking back, it just makes so much sense. But then it didn't make sense. Like I remember I was wearing my Garmin. I looked, I'm like, wow, I swam 500 yards today total, maybe 200 yards. So I think I liked that about swim mastery is that my goals changed. It wasn't about cranking out yards. It wasn't about going faster. It was about how can I use different, like we call them cues or aspects of my stroke to do that. What is my head doing? What are my frame or my torso doing? What are these little appendages to my torso that we call arms? Like, how am I using those? And how can I focus on that? So I think the biggest adjustment from my past to swim mastery was allowing myself to reward myself mentally for looking at the details of my stroke and not just having a goal that was time or distance oriented. That was different.
I like how you actually use the word reward, because I think it's common, because it feels like a bit of a human need, but it's how can we shift that reward idea to the focus that you put into your practice, right? Instead of the number of yards that you put in that were mindless. And I remember, I mean, it was hard to accept that you couldn't just swim after, or that, what was that like for you? And I guess, is there anything else that you've learned from that and applied elsewhere?
Yeah. In the past, I would swim for distance or time. I would feel good about myself. Like, oh, look at me. I just swam X number, hundreds or thousands of yards. Now I can feel good about myself. Or I swam lots and lots of speed. Now I feel good about myself. So building on like the idea of looking at my attention to the technique and details of my stroke and being like, wow, like I did some work today and this is really going to add up over time, and kind of having faith and trust that focuses that I was choosing. I was rewarding myself by knowing that I was building on something. I was creating a foundation that I'm like, my rewards at the time weren't distance, they weren't speed, but I knew it was going to result in that eventually, and giving myself that flexibility to take time to do that and not be in a hurry to do that, and to listen to my body in my stroke, to feel the pressure of the water on my toes, on my cuticles, on my torso, and how that could, I guess, like you really do have to have like a bit of like faith that this is my goal. Like I'm building that foundation and make my reward coming from that, knowing that I think we do that in our families too, like knowing like we're taking patience with our kids and helping them do the dishes. Like, okay, I think that dish is half clean. Okay, was it worth my time to have you spend 5 minutes washing one dish that is half clean? But I know when you grow older, it's going to make a big difference. So I think delayed gratification might be one way to describe it, and letting that be enough.
Did you know that you can support Marathon Swim Stories by subscribing? Even just a few dollars would be helpful to keep the stories coming to listeners like you. Check the show notes for a link to subscribe, and be sure to reach out to me and tell me what you'd like to hear more of. Thank you. So then what was for this preparation for your 10K this next year? So you started this transformation of your stroke. And what's that like going into the 10K goal you set that first year that we were working together?
So the first year we were working together, so we went from the 5K in a lake and we were going to shoot for our 10K. It was Bridges to Bluffs in the Tennessee River in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I heard that that was just a fun event and I wanted something fun. So I think the progress that we made towards the 10K, it was really interesting. I really got to see those freestyle fundamentals build upon each other. It gave me a different vocabulary to ask questions as I was working with you. And it gave me some ability to feel my body in the water so that I knew when something wasn't working, I had some tools to know what to do about it. For example, training for that 10K, I just remember a couple of times like, wait a second. I am dragging in the water. All right, let's think back. What are some of my fundamentals that I've built this foundation that I can build upon in those cues? How can that help me analyze, like, what do I need to do to fix this? And so then I could start looking at that and paying attention to those details in my practice. So training for the 10K was a little interesting because I wasn't focused on being able to swim a 10K prior to showing up to the event. I was working on, I think that's been the one main difference that I've noticed between the swim mastery foundations and just traditional marathon swimming. For, I think the traditional marathon swimming is if I'm doing an event with so many thousands of yards, I need to train and do this many thousands of yards each week so I can build up to it. But with swim mastery, I feel like the biggest difference is we focus on technique and being able to maintain that technique with fatigue and being able to make sure we're mentally prepared, of course, for maintaining that technique for long periods of time. So as I progressed towards this 10K, it felt different. Like my husband was training for some long runs and he would have a particularly long run and I would be working on my technique and it was different and it really paid off. I didn't have shoulder pain. I didn't have neck pain and I was able to enjoy it. Like, I think that was the biggest thing is I still wanted my swimming to be enjoyable. I wanted to show up to this event, this 10K and I wanted to have fun. I wanted to enjoy it. And I was able to because I had built these techniques in my training to do that.
How did you build the confidence needed? Because I think there is a confidence piece to showing up and knowing that you'll be able to get through it if you are doing, maybe swimming 3 times a week like you were doing with a little bit of test here and there. But tell us a little more about that.
I think the biggest piece for the confidence was being able to do small steps of working up towards a bigger goal. So I had done a couple of like smaller swims, like a 1-hour practice swim, and then maybe doing that a couple times. So during, for example, 1 month, I would have my normal like 3 times a week, 1 hour before I went to work. type training. But then in the weekend, I would try to do a 1 hour swim at our nearby lake. And then another time that month, do a 1 hour swim. And then I would try to see, well, what would it feel like to do a 1.5 hour swim? What would it feel like to do a 2 hour swim? And I remember I built up to being able to do a 2.5 hour swim. And I think my friends are what made it enjoyable. So I had a lot of friends to like be in a kayak beside me, and they would talk to me and like encourage me. And so I think the confidence piece came from knowing that I had done long swims before, and I had been able to kind of keep calm, I guess, while doing that. Because I feel like when you jump in a body of water, you're like, okay, what's going to happen here? I mean, it's an open, like, will I come across a beaver? Like, what kind of wildlife will I see? Or so I think just having people around me that had helped me practice, like when I showed up on the day of the 10K, there were still people around me. There were other people doing the swim, and just knowing that, I think the confidence piece just came from knowing that I could, whatever happened, whether I was able to complete the 10K or not complete the 10K, that I was still enjoying it.
And then it seems like it was right after that 10K that we met for the first time in person in Greece.
Yes. Okay. So that was, I think, the biggest part. The 10K was good, but I think going to Greece with Swim Masteries Camp, oh my goodness, that was like, okay, that's where the fun really started happening. I was watching all these people swim, and just from all like backgrounds and walks of life and ability levels, and everybody was smiling, and we were all asking questions, and we were curious and inquisitive about our swimming. And that was like a big game changer. As I was training for my first 10K Bridges to Bluffs, I kind of was wondering if it was fun anymore. After swimming for 2 hours, is it fun, or am I just doing it to do it? And I think the swim camp in Greece taught me how much fun I could have and would have. And that changed my perspective. I feel like, for example, I think when I was training for my first 10K, I just wanted to finish it. I did have fun with my friends training for it. I just wanted to finish. But in Greece, we made it an adventure. Like, oh my goodness. So in Greece, I liked how in the morning we would have instruction with our coaches and with Tracy, and we would practice applying those principles. And in the afternoon, we had this, I'll call it an adventure swim. I'm not sure what Tracy and the coaches wanted it to be perceived as, but I'll call it an adventure swim. And we would go out in our small groups, and we would practice some of those principles we had learned that morning. And I remember my favorite day, we were on this beach, and it was choppy. And I was like, oh, everybody, we're going out in that. Oh, okay. All right, here we go. And it was fun. Like, we were looking at the bottom of this beautiful water and seeing all sorts of things while the water was bobbing us around. And I remember looking over, like, I don't think I could see the people in my group. Oh no, there they are. They're in the trough of that chop. And oh, I'm up here on the crest. Okay, we're still good. We're still good. And we talked to each other while we were here, be like, this is choppy. And we would talk about the different beaches that we would see. And I remember one of our first days in camp, Shannon, there was that day where we were practicing our sighting, and everybody's like, well, we're just going to swim back. And I was like, what do you mean swim back? And like, yeah, we're just going to swim across the bay. And I was like, I don't think I feel comfortable doing that. I'm going to take the rental car and just go back. Yeah, that sounds right. And I just was a little not confident. But then at the end of the camp, we had the opportunity to make that same crossing with the end of camp 10K kind of, or celebration swim or challenge swim, whatever. I thought about Girls on the Run. The end of the season 5K run is our celebration run. So I'll call it a celebration swim. And I got to cross that like several times, like that little stretch that everybody had slammed back to. And it felt almost like I was able to see, like, look, you were afraid of doing this. You might not have said you were afraid, but you were uncomfortable. And then when you swim with the swim camp coaches and your swim camp friends, like, you talked about what you saw while you were swimming. You got to have that enjoyment of the adventure. And if somebody was like a little nervous, we talked about it and be like, whoa, did you see anything in the deep blue down there? And nope, I didn't either. That was a little unnerving. And it just became more of an adventure. That mindset change, I think, is what changed open water swimming for me. Like, it wasn't about just getting from point A to point B. It was about the adventure that I could have along the way. And that's what made it fun after that. Like that was a big game changer. Just instead of doing it to do it, like, how can I make this fun? I think you have to work hard at that. I think you have to make it fun, like the people you're with, and also how you can frame your perspective while doing it.
So then what happened after Greece?
Okay. So after Greece, I remember I talked to you and I said, I think I want to do Swim the Suck. It's, fairly close drive from my home in Virginia. And it's a 10-mile swim. And I remember asking, do you think I should do this jump in distance from 10K to 10 miles? And you're like, oh, definitely. I was like, okay, well, Shannon knows. Shannon knows her stuff. She wouldn't say yes if she didn't. So we spent the next months training for Swim the Suck. And right after I had registered for Swim the Suck, like official, like I'm signed up, my husband's mom, so my mother-in-law, got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And in case anybody didn't know, pancreatic cancer is not a good one. There's not really, like, let's say, a high success rate of treatment. And you don't really cure pancreatic cancer if you're stage 4. So that was a big blow to our family. So my mother-in-law is that person who bonds families together. She was active in our lives as adults. She's active in our children's lives. Like, she is the backbone. And to hear her be given 2 to, I think one person had said 11 months, another person had given her more time. It was just like, oh my, this is huge. So I think emotionally getting through that and training for my swim, I think the swimming was really good for me because I was able to swim mastery. We pay attention to the detail of our strokes. We don't really have a goal of, like, I would say, not letting our mind wander when we swim. Like, it was really good to just think about simple things while swimming. It was just a reprieve. Like, I couldn't really think about anything else other than just swimming. So I enjoyed being in the water, but it also made it really challenging. So it was easier for me to show up for my practice swim. So because I'm a teacher, I get the summers off. While I was working, it was easier to show up after she had got diagnosed because that was my routine. I did before I went to work in the morning. And the summer was harder to show up to do my swim practices during the week. We were just kind of adjusting with change, adjusting with her health. And I was kind of trying to make sure my kids had enough time with their grandma. We had a lot of family coming in to visit, and we were trying to spend time with them. It was a lot. And so my training, I wouldn't say was ideal. Like, we made it work. And then can I go ahead and make my progress towards the build up to Swim the Suck? So all right. So as I was preparing and life wasn't going as I had hoped, let's see, it was harder for me to fit in my long swims. I was very adamant that I wanted to do a long swim each month to work up to the need to be able to swim. I anticipated that Swim the Suck would take me between 5 and 5.5 hours, depending on the current. So I wanted to make sure I had done like a pretty substantial practice swim. And it was hard. My mother-in-law was the one who watched my children. She loved doing sleepovers with my kids. And those were the evenings when she wanted to do a sleepover that I would go to the lake and get in a long swim. And my husband was able to kayak beside me. Well, that didn't work anymore. Like, she wasn't able to watch the kids. My husband needed to. And so he couldn't kayak beside me. And I personally dislike swimming long distances in a pool. I know some people are able to do that. I have some muscle discomfort. It plays with my mind. I don't enjoy swimming long distances in a pool. I had to ask for help. So that's uncomfortable for me. So I asked coworkers, I asked friends if they would be willing to kayak beside me in the lake. I wasn't, with boat traffic, which is pretty heavy on this lake, I wasn't very comfortable swimming by myself. And I also have had some friends that had some medical situations arise when they did endurance events. And I was like, I would drown. Like, I need to have somebody beside me. Let's be smart. So I wasn't really willing to just swim by myself with no one else in the lake. So people stepped up, and it was really hard to ask for help, but like, God always provided for somebody to be there when I needed them to. Like, random friends, I was like, they were like, yeah, I'd been thinking about paddling, but I never had a reason. I didn't want to go by myself. And I'm like, well, that's perfect. Let's partner up. So that worked out great. So I was able to fit in my long swims. We also had family coming in to visit my mother-in-law. And while their families were here, they watched my kids for me. So I was able to get in a long practice swim with my husband. So he was my pilot. Now, we only practiced one time together before this event. So Swim the Suck finally was here, and my mother-in-law's health deteriorated. So we were anticipating she would be with us, like, I don't know, 10 months, maybe a year after she was diagnosed. And at 5 months, she started declining pretty quickly. So she passed away like 6 days before Swim the Suck. And that was hard. So, wow. We had to adjust. So her funeral was the day of Swim the Suck. Hurricane Helene came also and flooded out Swim the Suck. So the event itself got canceled. So I wasn't going to be able to go anyhow, but then Hurricane Helene made the call anyhow. So the event was canceled. And I just felt like I had so much support from friends, from family. Like I wanted to swim. I had trained as best as I could with the circumstances, and I wanted to swim. So I just started searching for what other events around me were going on that were available. So Swim Around Charleston, I was able to get a spot to swim around Charleston. And I remember, Shannon, you had brought up Swim Around Charleston, I think like around the time we went to Greece. And I was like, oh no, I can't do that. That's too long. Oh no, I can't do that. Well, I didn't really have a choice because there were no other events happening near me. And so I said, if there's a spot, I'm going to do it. Like, let's just go. Let's have an adventure. I just really wanted to swim. I think I wanted to do it for my mother-in-law. I wanted to do it for myself. For all the people who had helped me, like, let's go. So I think when we train for an endurance event, we want our situation and circumstances to be ideal. We want to be well rested. We want to feel good. We want to have our training to have been ideal. And it wasn't for this. And I had to wrap my head around that. I think I had mentioned, like, I just don't feel ready. And you had said, like, well, what would we need to do to feel ready? And there is no answer. You're never ready. So we just showed up. And it was interesting because a lot of things, once we finally showed up to try, and I took the whole family. I took the kids. I took my husband. I took my father-in-law. Like everybody went to support me. And we just decided to make it a weekend of it. And oh my goodness, the night before the swim, we still had things go wrong. I couldn't find my gels. I had prepared everything before I left. I couldn't find them. I was panicking, and they were underneath the air mattress that my children were sleeping on in the room in my Airbnb. So that's not ideal to have your kids, your 6 and 8-year-olds, sleeping on a mattress in their room where you're sleeping to get ready for an event. Oh my goodness. And the neighbor next to our Airbnb decided to hold a block party and had some very loud music. I could hear it in the shower. I was like, okay, this is not going well. So we showed up that day for Swim Around Charleston, and my husband was able to pilot me, and it started out great. We crossed a shipping channel, and where normally like container ships cross, and that was crazy fun. The tide was so strong, it just pulled us, and I felt like I was a mermaid. I'm like, oh, I'm such a good swimmer. This is wonderful. And then we ran around the tip of Charleston, and that's when things started getting really hard. So I had saltwater experience when we went to Greece to train. And so I felt prepared for the salt. I've never been in this much. I'd been in chop, but this was somehow, it just like, man, the chop was rough. The wake from boats was very rough. It just, wow, my body was tossed about. And so I started feeling seasick. I had gotten seasick before while snorkeling, but I figured it was like driving a car. Like if I'm swimming freestyle, I'm driving the car. I'm not going to get seasick because I hadn't had trouble in the past. When you're snorkeling, you're just a passenger. You're just floating around, looking at the fish. So I thought it would be different swimming. Oh no, it was not. I started feeling bad. I'm like, am I sick or am I just feeling bad? I don't know. So I just kept swimming. My husband said I was like slowing down, and then I started throwing up. I don't know how many times I threw up. It was a lot. And this was only like 2 hours into the swim. And I was having a hard time eating, not only because of the seasickness, but my jaw stopped working. I had brought some solid feeds to eat, and I could not chew them. I could not use my jaw. And so in hindsight, I think that I was carrying quite a bit of tension in my jaw when it got very, very choppy, and my body started not feeling very well. And so I couldn't chew my solid feeds, like, wow. And then I was shivering. So I generally shiver pretty bad when it gets cool. And I think I had slowed down quite a bit when I got sick and I wasn't generating enough heat. So I'm shivering. I was like, you know what? I can be proud of myself. So I just had this mentality that it's okay. Like, you showed up, You did something that you didn't have ideal training. You tried something new. You've not swam in salt water aside from your swim camp. Like, you can be proud of yourself. So I waited for my husband to call the safety boat to get me out. So because it was such a last minute event, I had studied the course, but not as much as the teacher in me would have preferred to. So I knew there was a safety checkpoint at some point after I had started throwing up. So I was like, oh, my husband, my wonderful husband, he'll get them. I'm just going to swim. It was really great at swim around Charleston. The race director has this motto that says, the paddler is in charge. The paddler is in charge. Swimmers are stupid. They have no idea what's going on. I was like, okay, I will trust my husband. He will figure out when is the best point to get out of the water. So I just kind of like gradually was swimming and kept swimming. And we decided to feed more frequently because I was shivering so bad. So I was trying to get calories down as best I could. He magically had a Zofran with him. Why does this man have a Zofran packed? Bless his heart. That helped as well. So I just kept going. And eventually I was like, okay, where is this safety boat? And so I asked him, I was like, how long have I been swimming? He was like, 4 hours. I was like, okay, my previous longest time swimming was 4 hours. Let's go for 4.5 and I can feel good about myself. So he was a good husband and we did 4.5 hours. And he's like, you're on pace to finish. He may have been lying a little bit. I'll give him some slack for that. And he's like, you're on pace to finish. Do you want to finish this? And I was like, let's do it. Like, let's go. And I was feeling better. So we were able to finish. I ran out of all my gel feeds. He gave me his own Gatorade. But afterwards, I'd asked him, so did you ask the safety boat if I should get out? He's like, no, you always talk about these marathon swim stories and people are throwing up all the time. He's like, I just figured it was part of the process. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, he's been listening to me. I feel so loved that when I prattle on about marathon swimming, he's actually been listening. So we finished and it took me 6.5 hours. I was so grateful that they allowed me to finish. It was good. It felt so good. And Shannon, I remember you had done your Lake Shasta swim and you had passed out afterwards into a bucket. And I was like, okay, let me learn from other generations. I am not going to stand up because I'm afraid I'm going to pass out. And I knew I was calorie and electrolyte deficient. I was like, I don't know how that's going to affect me. So I crawled out. My children were waiting for me, this precious 6-year-old and 8-year-old. And I was shivering so bad. And I think my daughters were concerned. So they had helped me get my arm in my jacket, which was precious because I felt like all my life I've been helping, put your arm in the hole. And they were like, Mom, put your arm in the hole. They wrapped me up and cuddled me. And that was so rewarding to have I don't think they've ever been with me on a marathon swim and it never worked out. So that was a wonderful moment to share with them. So my touching moment is my mother-in-law had this visor. And I've been thinking about like in my marathon swim story, like what would I want other people to know? So she had this visor and what had happened is she loved national parks and she liked seeing things in the national park, but she did not like long hikes. She did not like hiking uphill, but she did it. She showed up and she did it anyhow. And it was horrible for her. She would be like, oh, I can't do it. I can't get, and all of her children and family would help her. And one of her daughters wrote on this visor, only the strong survive. And it's kind of been like a family motto. We have a picture of my husband running on a half marathon and he's got his shirt like unzipped and he's got this stern look on his face. Our family motto for the picture is only the strong survive because it's so funny. But I put on her visor because it was in the vehicle. And because she had just passed away, it was a precious moment. And I've been thinking about what does that mean? Only the strong survive. And I've decided that being strong means that you show up. When you love something or you like it or you want to do it, you show up. Or if it's a goal, you just show up. Because I feel like that's been the story of my swim journey. I've never been good at swimming. I just show up and I want to do better. And I thought about what did it mean to survive? And when I thought about survive, it's that you make the most of it when you're there. So when the change for me between my first 10K and Greece and this longer swim was I found ways to make it fun. I like to talk to my pilots. I like to like look around me and see what I'm swimming beside. I like to eat snacks. Who doesn't? But I try to find ways to make the adventure fun. And I think just to laugh at yourself and to embrace the adventure and let it be. Like, I think in my mind, when I gotten sick, I just decided I was proud of myself for doing what I was able to do and trying something new. Swimming, finishing wasn't really in my line of thought. I don't think I allowed myself to see that as an option, but my husband did see that it was. So I think that like just looking at the people around us and asking for help or seeing what they can do to help us. So I think that's what I would want to like communicate in my marathon swim story is like only the strong survive. We can be strong. Like I'm an average person. I'm a mom. I'm a high school teacher. I didn't start swimming till my mid-20s. And that was because it was a backup plan. Like I never set out to be a marathon swimmer. It just kind of happened over time. And like by surviving, we enjoy it, the adventure. So I think that was a long-winded rendition of my Charleston story, but it was an epic adventure just leading up to it. The events of life with my mother-in-law passing away, it was hard, but I'm glad that I was blessed with the provision to be able to do it.
I love your story. It's been a gift to be a part of it. And I think this has been a big part for me too, is just how like learning to lean on people and leaning into your husband as your kayaker and into your, into me as a coach and into your community to help you train. And then I think it's just a beautiful part of what marathon swimming can teach us about ourselves.
Yeah. We're just all a big community.
Yeah. Maybe we can't do it by ourselves, right? We can show up, but you can only show up because someone's watching your kids or, like there's something in every little piece if we allow it to be. I think if we try to muscle up and do it all by ourselves, like, I don't think you can.
No. And it's not as fun. Like, I think there comes a point in life where it's not just muscling through it. It gets more complicated than that when life's not going the way we want it to.
Yeah. And I guess that maybe that's just it, is life is more complicated than what you can perceive. And so we need to lean into community.
Yeah. And if just like training doesn't go the way you planned, like you can still have that moment. Like if your sleep beforehand didn't work or you lost your gels, like, and we're panicking, like all of these things are just growing experiences. And it's better to find out how we can always sit at home and do more laundry, wash more dishes, vacuum more floors, make more bed. But to do something for yourself that you set is like a goal. And I think goal is like an overstated word, just something you want to do, to just do it and see what happens. Because I know that's what my mother-in-law did. She went to national parks and she did not enjoy hiking, but it was important to her. She wanted to see the beautiful sights there. And so she did it and she worked towards it, and she had friends and encouragement to do it. And I think marathon swimming is really similar. Like we do it because we like it and it's a challenge, and sometimes it doesn't go the way we want. And that's okay. We're just mortals. Like, I think when I hear about more marathon swimmers, I'm like, who are these people? Like there's some type of, I don't know, superhero, like from the Avengers that just have these super abilities, but no, like there's a place for people who are just, we're all just people. We're all just mortals, and we're just making our way through this skill that we like.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story, Beth.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Shannon.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you were inspired by even just a moment of this story, please share it with a friend. You never know what might push someone out of their comfort zone so that they can find out what they're capable of. And please leave a review with your podcast provider. It truly helps others discover the raw and honest stories of these amazing endurance swimmers. Thanks for listening.